Okay, so as you know, these grants are just a small sampling of our 2018 community investments. Last year, we had also established a Mission-Related Investment Committee, or MRI for short, to assist with a dedicated fund over at VCF. This is an opportunity for philanthropic dollars to bridge the gap between the community's need for capital to support important and emerging projects and what the private market can provide. This committee, which is chaired by our former chair, Alan Tima, will interface with the staff in New Haven to recommend investment opportunities that would be appropriate here in the Valley. Continuing our commitment to ongoing data collection and its practical usage, many conversations have already taken place to begin framing the 2019 Valley Community Index. This is an updated report from our initial Community Index, but this one will highlight, again, the needs and opportunities that exist here in the Valley region. Initial data from the index has already helped to shape a new collaborative model which we know as collective impact. To share with you what we mean by collective impact and how it's going to relate to the bigger picture, it is my pleasure to introduce our President and CEO, Sharon Closius. Sharon?
Thank you, Don. Thank you, everyone, for coming tonight. And I want to thank Lynn and Will, and especially Jimmy, for all that you've done, and along with all the other members of our board of directors, both past and present. Your leadership, your support, and drive to provide the Valley with a permanent, multifaceted philanthropic resource will and has already changed the lives of many here in the Valley. And we thank you for all that dedication. And thank you, Byrne, and thank you, Jada, for coming tonight, and David and Reverend Smith for representing the bus, the Martin Luther King bus. Your contributions you make and will make in the Valley for years to come. We thank you. You know, when I think about the placing of the Martin Luther King bust on the steps of Ansonia City Hall, that's a big responsibility. That's a big message to a lot of people. And I applaud Mayor Cassetti, I applaud the Board of Aldermen, and the people that stood up and said, we want to have this in downtown Ansonia. That's a big message and a big responsibility. And it's a permanent reminder for all of those to hear the message of Martin Luther King, which David so eloquently talked about. These words are not just words of our racial equity, as David said. It's about inclusiveness. It's about acceptance. It's about love. It's about being there for one another. And it's about what kind of livelihood we want, or the kind of lives we want for our own personhood, for our own kids, and for our own society. These are incredibly strong words that we can live by. We selected these two grant recipients as example of some of the work that the Community Foundation is doing. But as Don mentioned, there's another role. I keep feeling like this is going off and on. There's another role beyond grant making that has been emerging for VCF for the last few years. And that is active community leadership, participation in our community issues. Our theme for this year's annual report, as you heard, is connecting, building, and expanding the possibilities. It's a beautiful report that you're going to be receiving on your way out. And our theme this evening, I'm going to use a couple of the pictures that are on the cover of the book. And the first one is, of course, this little pond with a little pebble dropped into it. And we think that this really expresses some of the higher callings, some of these pictures, of what the Community Foundation is doing. We believe that we are all connected. A pebble dropped in the water doesn't just stop with the splash. Its effects continue on in making larger and larger rings. This analogy can be positive and it can be negative. Grants like the one to junior achievement allow Jada to have an experience that she will carry on into her adulthood. And how do we know that? Because of all the other JA volunteers that have come back to work the program, or the people who have been in the program that have come back to volunteer. But of course, that ripple can also reflect disturbance in the calm waters. A challenge in our community that needs to be addressed and only grows larger and affecting the calm water, even on the other side of the pond. We are all connected. Another picture you're going to see is the beautiful honeycomb, the yellow honeycomb right in the middle. And I'm sure you're wondering about these beehives that are at all the tables. And as you may want to take these beehives home with you, and so tempted to take them, I have to ask you to leave them behind. I thank Beth Colette and the Derby Garden Club for donating their time and effort to put together these hives for us, as well as for a project that they're working on. But if anybody wants instructions, I'm sure Beth will share with you how she made all of these beehives. And by the way, that also goes for the paddles. I'm sorry, but they do have to stay behind. My daughter has already asked me about the paddles. But anyway, I wanted to share with you a little bit about these bees and why the beehive is on the front of our cover. Bees are fascinating. These little insects that usually scare us for fear of being stung are critically important to our food supply. And I'm not talking about the honey that they produce. Bees pollinate more than 1/3 of all the world's crops. Apples, almonds, blueberries, oranges, broccoli. That's just a handful of the dozens of crops that these little bees pollinate for us. It's estimated that the honeybee colonies contribute over $20 billion to our U.S. crops. There are approximately 2.7 million bee colonies in the United States. And just FYI, there are about 50,000 bees in a colony. That's a heck of a lot of bees. And what's really interesting is 2/3 of our bee colonies are shipped around the country to pollinate our crops. They literally are put on the back of trailers taken from crop to crop to pollinate our farms and to pollinate our crops. Kind of reminds me of the migrant workers, doesn't it? They come in after the crops are done and get the food. Our bees are the ones who are pollinating it, going from crop to crop. The California almond industry needs 1.8 million bees to adequately pollinate their 1 million+ acres of almond orchards. That's a lot of almonds that we've been consuming, almond milk and everything else, and it's because of those bees that we're able to do all of that. But you're asking, I'm sure, so what does this have to do with us? Well, bear with me. These little insects are critically strong members of our workforce. And about 10 years ago, beekeepers started reporting that their honeybee colonies were dying at alarming rates. Why were these colonies collapsing? Researchers began studying the bees and the hives, and they found a number of the main stressors that contributed to the collapse of the hives. One was a virus that the bees would pick up and spread to one another when they would be released to pollinate all those crops. Another is the vast food deserts that we are now creating. We are putting miles and miles of the same crop together, and the bees come in, but all of a sudden, when the blossoms are gone from those crops, the bees don't have any food left to eat. And another one I'm sure that you are not surprised about are the pesticides and the insecticides. Those are in our backyards, in our crops, as well as those large commercial farms. Our little worker bees are out doing their job, helping us, filling up with nectar and pollen, and basically, they're getting poisoned. I bring up this last example because educating people, us as consumers, our farmers, our legislators, we can make a difference, at least to our local bee colonies. Being respectful, responsible for what we spray on our crops and in our gardens will directly make a difference. But I know there's going to be a challenge. I know I love the butterflies in my garden, but I really don't like those caterpillars eating my leaves. I really want to figure out how not to have those caterpillars eating things. But you know what? Sometimes when we want to have those gardens and we want to have bountiful crops, we need to look at what's for the greater good. And sometimes we need to yield our own personal interests for what is for the greater good. Our actions directly, indirectly affect others. Our children, our families, yep, even our insect workforce. We affect everybody. So now, can you kind of see the analogy that I'm pulling out here with the bees? And why the story of the bees? It isn't that if VCF is getting into beekeeping, and we're not doing a Save the Bee MRI. Where is Alan? We're not doing that, Alan. It's a story of interconnectedness. How the health of the hive is dependent on the health of the systems that support it. And there are multiple stressors that can affect the balance of the ecosystem. This is the story of our communities and the families and the individuals that live here. These past couple of years, we have had more and more discussions about working together to collectively impact and affect positive systemic change on the problem of equity and economic disparity in the valley, especially our children living in poverty. Based on the data presented in that 2016 Community Index, 26% of the children under 17 years old live in low-income households. Some communities are much higher than that. And within those communities, some neighborhoods are much higher than that still. Dozens of family leaders have been coming together to have real, honest conversations about our region's needs and opportunities. Next month begins conversations with people who have lived experiences to get their input and to get their understanding of what is going on in their areas. There isn't just going to be one answer. Why should we care if we don't live in those neighborhoods or communities? The stressors associated with economic security affect not only the child and the family. This affects the resources of the community, the schools, the state, the nation, and most importantly, it affects the next generation. Have I mentioned that we're all really interconnected here? Using the analogy of the bees, if we stopped spraying insecticides, the bees probably would still die if those around you continued to use those insecticides. It's all interconnected, and we have the need to have the courage to take a look at our own ecosystem. The great news about here in the valley is we've got so many people that are already committed to the valley to become a stronger and healthier place to live. I am very, very pleased with VCF's role in this meaningful dialogue. Over the next couple of years, these conversations and the data collections will begin, and we will then have a clearer understanding of how the outside factors have affected our hive and what corrective actions need to be taken for our region's health. A simple catalyst for action, which can be an idea, a vision, a common goal, can create waves in our community. And with a shared vision for the future, we, just like these bees, diligently work towards that destination. Over time, the fruits of our labor, and with your support, will spread, blossom, and grow into something beautiful that can be enjoyed by all. Together, we can connect, build, and expand the possibilities for here in the Valley. And I want to thank our incredible staff before I turn over the microphone again. Val, who in addition to doing our grant work, also heads up this community impact work. John Reddy, for our communication and marketing guru. Thanks for making this annual report, I think, one of the best that we have. I'm sure you'll all agree when you see it. And for Beth Collette for taking such good care of our donors and fund holders, as well as our office. We just have a small group and everybody comes together and does such a great job. And of course, as mentioned, we thank the staff in New Haven, because without your support, we wouldn't be able to do what we do. So thank you. And I want to do a quick shout out to my 3 kids. They made it tonight. Can you guys give a wave? Thank you for coming and enjoying our 15-year anniversary. You know, community foundations wouldn't exist without donors who establish funds to impact issues that they care about in the community. They are our lifeline. So I'm going to turn this meeting now over to Jen Magri.